Hello, you're watching Calling All Stations, Woodford Wells Layout Update 3. Sorry guys, I know it's been a while since I last did my layout updates. It's been a fairly slow process. I've been taking my time over it, but I thought now would be a fairly decent opportunity to show you where I'm at. And actually, you'll probably see, first of all, quite a lot has actually happened since the last time you saw a layout update from me. So I'll just go into a few more of the details with you now. Okay, the first thing you'll notice I've done is I've put in the backboards and given them sort of a general sky blue wash with some general Dulux paint. I may go in later on and either add some sort of cloud effects and sort of change the texture of the back scene, because it's all kind of one colour and a bit boring right now, or I'll go in and buy some glossy back scenes. I know I've seen a few videos of people using these kind of really high quality back scenes, real photography of real places. So I'm thinking maybe a sort of cityscape or at best some kind of trees. But right now this is kind of a good starting point to just have a sky blue wash behind the main scenery. One minor change to point out is originally I intended this area here to be a town scene, so once the scenery got up to the retaining wall top, it would have gone back and then up again. That would have given space for some kind of shops or something above that. I've kind of axed that for now, just because it was a little bit more complicated to build in, and I desperately wanted access to the fiddle yard behind it. So to keep it simple, it's just going to be a continuation of the back scene from the other baseboard along to your left. The next major bit of work was adding third rail to most of the lines on the layout. I've used Pecco's Code 60 rail and a pack of the Pecco rail insulators, which are these little white things. You can cut the rail to any size you like and slot the rail insulators along the rail. You then drill some fine holes in the sleepers, and I've chosen a gap of about 5 sleepers apart each time, and that's roughly prototypical. And then you can just slot the whole operation into the track. Now, third rail systems predominantly found in the south of England and in South London, although Chingford, which I'm basing the layout upon, or basing the station design upon, is in North London and doesn't have a third rail system. I'm using a little bit of artistic license there, mainly because I've already got some rolling stock that would have run on a third rail system, some Class 411s, a 416. I've got my eye on some other third rail EMU sets, so I used a bit of artistic license there, but as I've always said from the start, I'm not replicating Chingford. I'm just using it to focus some of my energies on sort of a London suburban station to base some ideas around. It's purely really for the station side rather than track work and where it actually is. You may notice there's a slight gap in the third rail here and here. This I sort of cleverly added in to illustrate to me that underneath here in the gap, you might be able to just see it, that shiny silver thing with the arrow denoting where it is. There's a magnet which is for the KD coupling system. So if you shunt a piece of rolling stock over the track magnet, you can uncouple it without having to interfere with the rolling stock yourself. I was coming up with ideas of how I would illustrate that once I've ballasted over this and help me remember where the track magnets are. And then I thought, why not have a gap in the third rail? And that gives me an idea exactly where that track magnet is. It's not 100% prototypical. You do get gaps like this which illustrate different sections of track power in real life. But the majority of time one piece of third rail ends, another piece of third rail is picking up the opposite side. And to have this many gaps on the layout that I have is probably unrealistic, but I thought it was a good idea to use that to illustrate to myself, there's a track magnet under there, and that's where I can shunt rolling stock to and uncouple it automatically, and that will be a good clue once that's all ballasted over and I can no longer see the track magnet itself underneath the sleepers. Down at the platform end, I've added in a retaining wall. This is a kit from Ratio. It's actually missing some of the buttresses, which would fit in here and kind of hide the gap between each section of retaining wall. Those will eventually be fitted once this all gets glued down, and I've got to wait until I do all the track ballasting, until and the lighting on the stations before I finally glue all these bits together. So that's something that will come way down the line. The other thing I've done is the platform canopies, which is an adaptation of the wheels kit. Normally these come in sort of a more kind of tapered roof shape, V-roof shape rather, and I've altered it so that it's a nice flat roof, and this is kind of to mimic actual Chingford. It has a flatbed roof on top of the station canopy. Again, the legs there look a little bit all wonky. It's because it's just in a rough place. Eventually it'll all get glued down, and the legs of the canopy itself will be painted red for Network Southeast. So that's all to come, but that's in a rough position, and I'm quite happy how it's come out, considering I didn't build the kit to its specifications. I kind of adapted it. Next up, I bought some Traintech DCC signals. These are signals with DCC chips pre-installed, so they're really easy to hook up to your controller, or kind of easy. I'll get onto that in a second. It's slightly more expensive than buying like one of the Econ signal kits and then a DCC decoder, accessory decoder separately. They cost around about, well, it depends how many aspects you get and if you're getting a junction signal, but around about £25 per signal, which sounds a lot, but then when you kind of spec up a signal kit plus DCC accessory decoders, it's near enough the same. These work out a little bit more expensive, but the benefit is they are, for the most part, really easy to set up. So for the one in the foreground, the joint head signal there for platforms 2 and 3, that was really easy to set up. All you do is you touch 2 contact pins on the signal and it puts it into programming mode. You then assign an address for the first aspect head, and then you assign an address for the second one, and then it basically works. When the accessory is on, it switches the signal. So if it's on, it's green; if it's off, it's red. Really simple. The one in the background is a 3-aspect signal, and that was slightly more complicated. Only maybe for the reason I'm using the Z21, it was a little bit more fiddly to set up. So again, that has 2 individual DCC addresses. The first one's for green and red, and again it's the same as the one in the foreground. If it's on, it's green; if it's off, it's red. But then it has a second address for the yellow, and you might think, okay, if the second address is on, then it's yellow; if it's off, it's nothing. Well, actually the second address, if it receives either an on or off signal, it then changes to yellow regardless of the direction of that signal, or the value of the value of the signal from your controller. That was a bit confusing to set up, because in the Roku app and on the Z21, I'll just show you here, you do have the option for a 3-aspect signal, and I thought, well, I'll try that. And you can go in and change the configuration. That's what I'm talking about, of on and off. So you'll see for the green and the red, the first address both off, and then the second address is either on or off depending on which aspect the signal is. Now the controller here, the app, wants the same configuration for the yellow aspect, but it doesn't quite work like that on the signal. So instead you have to set up 2 separate signals. I'm just loading my controller page to show you now. You have to set up 2 separate signals, and for this one it's the aspects in the bottom left. So the one that's red that says 811, that's controlling the red and the green, and then 812 is just controlling the yellow. And it doesn't matter if that is lit green or red, it will flick to yellow. It's rather confusing, but what I actually did was then just set up a sequence button, which is up here, and I've called it platform 1 clear, that just sequences through the light. So if I press that, if you watch the signal in the background, I'm going to press platform 1 clear and it will cycle to yellow and then it will cycle to green. So if I come back to the controller and then press 811, that's now flipped the signal to red. I can manually flip that back to green with 811, which it's done there. Now if I wanted to manually select yellow, I would then select 812, which is the second address, which I've just done there, and it's flipped it to yellow. If I then flip it back, sorry, this is rather confusing, isn't it? If I then flip it back on 811 to red, and you'll notice 812 has stayed red as well, I can press that again and it will go to yellow. And I can press 812 as many times as I like, and it doesn't matter what it illustrates to me on the controller, it will always go to yellow. I hope that vaguely makes sense. If not, drop me a comment and I'll try and better explain that. Now for the bridge part of the middle of the layout, and this was always designed to be removable, so I can kind of lift that up. This whole section comes out and then I can separate the two baseboards, and this was always designed to hide the fact that there's a join in the two baseboards, which I think it's doing pretty well. I'm pretty happy also with the design of the girder bridge. These are Will's Vary girder kits, I think, that I've used. They basically come in all these individual little parts and then you kind of glue them on where you want them. I went and had a look at a few plate girder bridges in my surrounding area, and they all kind of look like this, a sort of two-tiered level, with the second tier sort of coming out slightly more than the first one. I may also add some slight embellishes to the bottom layer, some kind of that would support this kind of buttress thing here, but that's all to come. At the moment I'm pretty pleased with the way it looks and the way it sits on the layout. On the bridge itself, I've added in this sort of tube station thing, and I say that kind of loosely because I'm sort of not sure about how it looks at the moment. I think it's because the roof of the station is slightly too low. You'd never have a roof that's that low on the underground, even though it accommodates the train perfectly well. The platform itself would be much larger. It does hide the fact that the tunnel sort of goes to nowhere. It just goes to the back of the board, which I do like, but I'm just not sure about that roof. I don't think it looks quite right, so I'm not sure what I'll do with that in the future. I might kind of continue with it and see how it looks once I've added in some more detail, but for now I'm not quite sure about it, so we'll see how that pans out. But on the whole, I'm really pleased with the fact that this lifts out really nicely, and it does exactly what I thought it would do, which is hide the baseboard joint below. And finally, down the yard end of the layout, I've also extended the retaining wall backdrop, which runs for pretty much most of the layout, to be honest. This time I've used modelrailwayscenery.com's printed kits. You can either print them out yourself or you can order them specially printed and they'll send you the card and everything, and you can just put them together. You'll see on the camera, or I can see at least, that there's some weird kind of strobing effect going on there, so I think it's kind of reacting to the glossy paper. And on that note, the glossy paper effect, I'm not sure about how that kind of works once it's up on the layout. I really kind of like the structure of the walls, and I like how you kind of got these buttresses and kind of lower stanchions of the wall. That looks really great, and the weathering effect looks superb. But I'm just not sure about the glossy effect on the paper. I may try and spray paint it with some matte paint, perhaps, to kind of take some of the edge off. But at the moment it just looks a little bit unnatural because it's got a bit of a shine to it. I'll see how it pans out when I add in some more scenery and see if I can kind of hide it behind that. but it's something I may change in the future. I did choose this kit because it was the right height. The height, once it got round to here, it kind of matched up perfectly with A, the bridge, and then B, this kind of bit of back scene here. So I need a retaining wall that's at least this high, and this was one of the only kits that did that. So either I can go back to the drawing board and design my own with some of the Metcalf cardboard, which I've used on the bridge and the station there. If I just pan up slightly, that in the background there is some Metcalf card, which is just comes in sheets of wood or brick or tiling, and it's really great. You can just shape it to any size you want. So I could either redesign my own, or I could stick with this and try and adapt it. I don't know. What do you think? If I spray painted that, would it just ruin the glossy effect, ruin the glossy paper itself, or do you think it would take some of the edge off that kind of a shiny effect? The other thing is the printed weathering effect. Although it does look great, it does sort of repeat itself. So every now and then you can kind of spot that it's repeating itself, which looks a little bit odd. But only if you really concentrate on it hard. But other than that, other than all those things that I've complained about, I do think it does look quite good. It's certainly the right height. It's certainly the right look. The kind of design, the architecture of the wall is what I want. So I'm in two minds about whether I'm going to keep that or whether I'm just going to rip it out and do something different. The final thing to mention is this little fueling point down here. This is from Bachmann. This is a Scenecraft item. Just a nice little addition for this sort of yard area. A diesel refueling point. And on that note, you'll notice that the third siding down here doesn't have third rail. That was perfectly deliberate. I thought there's no point completely kitting out the whole layout with third rail. This siding's just going to be used for either freight or storage of diesel rolling stock. That doesn't mean diesel rolling stock couldn't shunt a EMU into this siding. Of course it could, but I didn't want to just completely whitewash everything with third rail, so that's why this siding doesn't have it, and it kind of matches up with the fuel point there. I think that's pretty much all I've got to talk to you for now. Hopefully I'll come back with some more updates soon. I'm going to the Wali Festival on Sunday, this Sunday the 29th, I think. Hopefully what I want to pick up from that is some shunt signals. That's sort of the last thing, or one of the last things other than lighting, that I want to do before I start thinking about ballasting. I've kind of put off ballasting as long as possible, so that it doesn't get in the way of me having to drill holes for signals and other things that need access to the bottom of the board, or the underneath of the board rather. So that's why it's been a very slow process so far. But I'm taking my time with it. I'm not rushing things. I'm doing lots of research on everything that I want to buy before I go and buy it. I like to make sure it's perfect and it's going to look the part on the layout. Well, apart from the back scenes, which I'm kind of not sure about. So that's what I'm going to be looking for there. Some shunt signals. Let me know if you've seen any good ones. The easier to fit the better, like the Train Tech signals. But I'm probably going to have to buy separate DCC accessory decoders for any shunt signals. I haven't seen any with built-in decoders. But if you do know of some, let me know, comment section below. Until next time, guys, keep checking back on the website for all the stuff that I'm doing, the CAS Weekly. I've got some other videos that I've kind of got in the pipeline coming up soon about Network South East, about stations in London. So keep going to the website, www.coolingallstations.co.uk. Leave me a comment down below what you think of the video. On that note, I'm still having the problem with the point motors. I know a couple of people commented on the last video with some good advice. I tried all your different options, guys, and I still couldn't work it out. One guy said something about maybe it's the controller. So maybe I am setting the point motors correctly. And just to refresh you guys who have just joined the series, basically when I turn the layout on, it goes in, the points go into a reset mode, and they're both basically trying to self-center. And that basically means when you then operate the layout for the first time, none of the points are set in any direction. You have to then all go through manually and set the points. It's a bit frustrating, especially if you accidentally get a short circuit. You have to restart the layout, and it switches on all the points and it resets them again. It's really annoying. Somebody said that it's possibly the controller that's overriding the command, which it could be, because the Z21 and the Roku app is kind of pretty basic in terms of setting up accessories. It's really easy, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of, there's not many more options other than here's the address and here's the polarity. So maybe it's the controller, and short of buying a completely new controller from another brand and testing it, I'm not sure what other avenues I have to explore on that. So if anybody does know, comment below. We'll figure it out eventually, guys. But like I said, keep checking the website, www.callingallstations.co.uk, and I will see you again soon.